The film begins in Buffalo, New York, where we meet Henry, a man who works at a toll booth and lives a mundane life. One morning, after finishing his night shift, he returns home to have breakfast with his wife Debbie. She brings up wanting to have a child as they talk, but Henry appears hesitant about the idea. This irritates Debbie, who asks if he still loves her, and while he says yes, his expression suggests otherwise. However, their conversation is interrupted by a knock on the door, which turns out to be Henry's friend Eddie. Joe, a man who is vomiting profusely in the front yard, is with him. Debbie, who is a nurse, takes care of Joe after bringing him inside. Eddie then informs Henry that they were going to play head baseball, but Joe is sick and cannot participate at this time. He invites Henry to join them instead, and despite his initial reluctance, the man eventually accepts. But soon after, they arrive in front of the Buffalo Bank, where Eddie and his friend claim they are only going to withdraw money from the ATM. But it turns out they're robbers, as they put on masks and asks to head inside the bank with guns. A perplexed Henry remains in the car and soon realizes the vehicle has been stolen and started by tampering with the wire. A security alarm sounds moments later, and Eddie and his friend flee the bank. Frank, a security guard, notices Henry wearing the robber's jersey and restrains him. At the police station, the officers realize Henry was not the robber and ask for the names of his friends, but he refuses to say anything. The poor guy is thus sentenced to 3 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. He meets his cellmate, Max, who is an ex-con. Max asks why he is in prison, and Henry explains that he was wrongfully accused of bank robbery. Max appears to be a wise man who tells Henry that failing to pursue one's dreams is the real crime. The two men become good friends. He claims that all of the prisoners there once had big dreams, but something went wrong in their lives, causing them to end up in prison. He asks Henry about his dreams, but the latter shockingly reveals that he has none. The scene then shifts to 6 months later, when Debbie pays Henry a visit in prison and, to his surprise, reveals that she has fallen in love with someone else. Strangely, Henry does not appear to be hurt and instead wishes her the best in life. The scene then shifts to a year later, where Henry is seen socializing with Max and other inmates. Max reveals that every time he has a parole hearing, he tells the officer that if he is released, he will break into his house, kill his dog, burn it down, and cut out the tongues of everyone who breathes. Max does not want to leave prison and has come to accept it as his home. Later, Henry asks Max what his dream is, and the elderly man replies that he is living his dream, which is to remain in jail. When it comes time for Henry's parole review, it appears that he, too, does not want to leave prison. Max, on the other hand, encourages him to behave and wishes they would never see each other again. Later, Henry is granted parole and is released from prison early. He returns home, only to discover that Debbie is now in a relationship with Joe and even pregnant. While he is gathering his belongings, Joe approaches him and offers him a job, which turns out to be a pyramid scheme, which Henry refuses. Joe thanks him for not giving his name to the cops, but Henry says he doesn't even know his name. That night, Henry watches a woman's commercial on television promoting the city lottery, known as Buffalotto. The next day, bored and unsure what to do, he returns to the Buffalo Bank and begins staring for no apparent reason. Suddenly, a car appears from nowhere and runs him down. The driver turns out to be Julie, a woman who begins calling him an idiot. But Frank, the security guard, chastises her for being distracted on the phone. He appears to be kind, even assisting Henry in going to a nearby cafe. Julie offers to take him to the hospital, but Frank insists he is fine, and he quickly realizes she is the same woman from the lottery commercial. Frank goes to the bathroom to urinate after Julie leaves, and while there, he reads an old newspaper article that hangs on the wall. The Buffalo Bank robbery, which took place in the 1930s during Prohibition, is described in the article. A gang of criminals carried out the robbery through an underground passageway that had previously been used by bootleggers. The passageway is located in an adjacent theater, where the gang carried out a multi-million-dollar heist. When Henry sees this, he comes up with an idea and goes to meet Max in prison. He reveals that his dream is to rob a Buffalo bank, the same crime for which he was wrongfully convicted. He asks Max for assistance, but the elderly man refuses to leave the prison, which is his home, because he is shocked by the absurd dream. Henry, on the other hand, persuades him to reconsider, claiming that he does not want Max to waste his life and die in prison. Henry then goes to the theater next to the bank, where he sees Julie rehearsing a Russian play with her team. The director appears harsh and scolds Julie for her poor performance, leaving her frustrated. Henry then notices her, and the two head to a nearby cafe, where he compliments her acting. She is flattered and thanks him for not suing her for the accident. In another scene, Max attends his parole review, and surprisingly, he behaves well and is released this time. Max is shocked to see that Henry doesn't even have a car when he arrives to pick him up some time later. This irritates him, and he attempts to return to prison, but Henry consoles him, explaining that the bus station is not far away. After that, they start planning the robbery and head to the cafe, where Max notices that the map is 80 years old. He calls the plan foolish because they cannot rely on such an out-of-date newspaper. He asks Henry if he has a gun, but he says no because he does not want to harm anyone. The two men then head to the bank and pretend to be new clients. Max uses his charm to get the employee to open up about the bank's history. He reveals that his uncle put all of his money in a vault here when he was a child, promising that the vault would last for 300 years. He asks if the vault is still in the same location as before, and the employee confirms that everything is still where it was in 1891. The employee then asks what kind of account they want to create, but the couple says they'll think about it and leaves, while Frank notices them. The two then head to the theater to look for the tunnel, where they run into Julie again. Max tells her that he was once an actor and used to perform at the same theater. He asks Simon, a staff member, to give them a tour of the place after using his charm to connect with him. During this, Max begins to discuss the old tunnel from many years ago. The naive Simon reveals that the tunnel exit is in the lead actor's dressing room, but it appears to have been sealed in 1931. Max then offers to work in the theater, to which Simon enthusiastically accepts. Elsewhere, Henry and Julie start chatting, and she asks if Max is his father, which he denies. When she asks what he does, he reveals that he was recently released from prison. He asks her out for dinner after rehearsal because it appears that he has started to like her. In the evening, Henry carefully prepares for his date and arrives at the restaurant, where Julie is late and stressed. She reveals how dissatisfied she is with this place and states that she plans to relocate to Hollywood after the play to pursue her acting career. When she asks why he went to jail, he reveals that he thought he was going to play baseball and was falsely accused. He then reveals that he intends to rob the bank for real this time, leaving her shocked and amused. They arrive at her place after that, where she makes him read the script and practice for the role. Julie asks him to play the lead, and Henry performs admirably, demonstrating a natural talent for acting. One thing leads to another, and the two spend the night passionately making love. Max initially ignores Julie when Henry brings her to his place the following day, but he eventually reveals the robbery. He then begins to panic, but Henry reassures him that Julie knows everything and will not tell anyone. Max is furious with him for telling her, but Henry manages to calm him down by offering him bacon. Later, Max arrives at the theater to volunteer, and he quickly realizes they need access to the male lead's dressing room. This will give them access to the old tunnel, allowing them to continue digging without being noticed. He devises a plan to replace the male lead with Henry. However, Henry believes it is a bad idea because he lacks acting knowledge and skills. The next day, the play's male lead resigns because he has been offered a larger role elsewhere. This frustrates the director and the entire team, so Max takes advantage of the situation and attempts to persuade Julie that Henry is ideal for the role. She refuses, claiming that Henry has never acted in his life, but Max continues to press and even reveals that it would aid in their robbery. Julie is shocked to learn that Max orchestrated the men for their mission, but she reluctantly agrees to recommend Henry for the role. The director clearly refuses to hire him, but he does give Henry a fair chance to audition. It starts off badly, but he eventually performs admirably, impressing everyone. As a result, Henry is cast as the male lead, which gives him access to the tunnel that leads to the bank's vault. Soon, the two men break through the dressing room wall, only to discover that the tunnel is sealed. They realize it is too much work to do on their own, so they hire someone. That evening, they met Joe, who was depressed because his pyramid scheme failed, leaving him unable to support Debbie and the baby. The two offer him a role in their heist, which the desperate man readily accepts. Over the next few days, the trio works hard to dig the tunnel, while Henry tirelessly prepares for his role in the play. One evening, as they leave the theater, Frank appears out of nowhere and stops them. He claims he has been watching since he first saw them at the bank and noticed them loitering around the theater. Frank admits he suspects they're planning a robbery but refuses to snitch. Instead, he wants in. He explains that once a month, an armored truck collects cash from partner branches and brings it to the vault, depositing between $8 and $12 million at the time. He then offers to be their inside man, promising to help them bypass security and disable the alarm. The trio, however, suspects a trap and asks Frank why he's doing all of this. Frank opens up, revealing that his wife became seriously ill years ago, and despite his 30 years of service at the bank, no one offered him assistance. He spent all of his retirement savings on her treatment, but she died from the illness, leaving him heartbroken and penniless. He reveals that he is retiring in just 2 weeks and wants to secure his retirement funds. After hearing his story, the group sympathizes with him and and eventually decides to include him in the plan. The next day at the theater, rehearsal goes on as usual, but the director continues to chastise Julie for her lack of emotion. He claims she has never loved anyone, which is why she does not understand emotions. This makes her feel terrible, and she begins to cry before walking away, with Henry following her. He tries to console her, but she explains that she's a damn good actress, but people have always told her she's cold as ice. Before kissing her, Henry reassures her that she is not cold, and it appears that their relationship is growing stronger. That night, Henry and Max were preparing for the heist when they heard a knock on the door. When Henry opens it, he is shocked to see Joe and his troublesome friend, Eddie. It turns out that Joe, who had been drinking, had revealed everything to Eddie, who now wants to participate in the heist. Max immediately dislikes him and points out that Joe may have simply blurted out nonsense and that they have no plans. But Eddie does not believe him, and the two have a heated argument. Things almost turn into a physical fight, but Henry steps in just in time and reluctantly agrees to include Eddie in the plan. The next day, Henry arrives at the theater to find that the play's premiere has been moved to the same night as the robbery. This puts him in a difficult position because he has fallen in love with Julie and does not want to leave her. However, Max reminds him that he was the one who drew him out of prison to join the heist, so he can't back out at this point. In the evening, Henry informs Julie that they must rob the bank on the first night of the show, which means he must leave afterward. This irritates her, especially since Henry is now the lead in the play, and the play will not be performed without him. She believes he only used her to get inside the theater, but Henry tries to reassure her that this is not the case. He tries to persuade her to meet him in California following the robbery, but she refuses and says it's fine for him to leave. Days later, the big night arrives, and everyone in the theater is busy getting ready for the premiere. Meanwhile, the money truck arrives at the bank and enters the vault, after which Frank gives the signal. Henry continues to perform in the play, but as soon as his scene ends, he rushes to help his friends. Max, on the other hand, goes to the tunnel with Joe and Eddie to carry out the heist. Eddie, who appears to be skilled with machinery, uses welding equipment to access the vault, while Joe begins to get sick again and continues to vomit. They eventually manage to open the vault and steal a large sum of money. Everything goes smoothly as they place the money in sacks and carry it into the dressing room. However, Eddie suddenly reveals his true colors and points a gun at Max, ordering him to step aside. He then tells Joe to load all of the money into the car so they can leave. Eddie refuses to do this despite Joe's attempts to lead him away from it. At this point, Henry enters the room, and Eddie threatens him as well, while hitting Max with the gun. However, Max quickly rises and disarms Eddie before he can brutally attack him. The two men struggle over the gun, and it accidentally fires, injuring Henry's leg. After Max manages to knock Eddie down, they leave him gagged and tied up in the tunnel. Following this, the rest of the gang takes the money to their car and drives away. However, Henry suddenly asks them to stop along the way, stating that he needs to go back to the theater. Joe is perplexed, but Max understands the situation and tells him to leave. Henry quickly returns to the theater, interrupting the play while his leg is bleeding. In a bold move, he publicly declares his love for Julie, leaving her and the audience speechless. This narrative fits the play's plot, which makes the audience excited. Julie is furious and tells Henry to leave, but he refuses and asks her to meet him in Moscow. She refuses, but the audience begins to cheer for her to accept him. The director is intrigued, so he dims the lights and encourages Julie to give her response. Julie does not say yes aloud, but a quick smile reveals that she has accepted his love. She then leans in to kiss him, but before we see what happens, the film ends. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, leave a comment about your favorite movie and we will make it next. Thanks for watching.